You know something? I've wanted to come to Porto Alegre for a very, very long time. You might not believe me, but there were so many pioneering things from Porto Alegre, and I hope you're still going to be pioneering in the future. And then, what a surprise, I come here and Juliana Sein has a similar background to me. We're both sort of ex-German heritage type people. So wir haben ja Deutsch gesprochen, oder? Das ist ja wahr, das ist kein Geheimnis. It's not a secret. Anyway, off we go. Do you mind going on this journey? I mean, I'm just going to go a bit like this. You told me to move around a bit, dance a bit. No, I'm not going to dance, don't worry. Now, is this going to work? Yes. These are very big words. Very, very big words. Some people have said they're the most complicated words in our language. And these are other big words that are also so complicated. All these important words are very difficult to define, but you know what they are somehow. So anyway, we're talking about culture, creativity, sustainability, and resilience. And then there's this question, cultural district, creative quarter, is it all the same thing? Probably yes, but nevertheless we should ask that. So there is a question of working all these things out and reflecting a bit on everything. Now, I think what our resource is, you know it, it's very easy to say, culture is who we are and creativity helps what we can become. I know that sounds incredibly simplistic, but that sentence has taken me 35 years to work out. Writing big books in a world of social media doesn't work anymore. But it's also like the air we breathe, and it's so difficult, isn't it? You're trying to explain to someone, what is this all about? And you say, well, it's the air you're breathing. It is all around you. And then they go blank. But it's also our second skin, as we know. Now, I think culture helps make sense of things. I think cultural insight and literacy is the most superior form of understanding. But I never really understood this word meaning. What does it mean? But then I realized that the things we think are significant, we often understand through culture, they are really important. Now, in the end, we know it's about identity, of course. Now, the creativity bit of it is, I'm speaking slowly, by the way. If I was in Britain, I would speak like this and say it's an energy, it's a life force, it's an attitude, it's an enabler. I won't talk like that, don't worry. So it is an energy and a life force. And that, to me, is really something so fundamental. Now, the qualities are clearly about being more of a yes person rather than a no person. And some of you, Gregoria knows, they run a festival in Berlin called the Creative Bureaucracy Festival. We like that combination. Which slogan is, how do you move from a no because to a yes if culture? Our friend from Rio earlier said, my biggest problem is the bureaucracy, but it can also be an enabler, and that was really important. So it's always a question of balancing this divergent, this creative, this expansive way of thinking with that which says, how do we move it into reality, which is convergent? So that, to me, is quite important. Now, the key question is, clearly, a creative district or quarter has a high density of these people who are culturally aware and have a bit of creativity. So the question is, what does this mean for the city? We know what it means for the district, but what does it mean for the city? Now, there was a guy a long, long time ago, one of the first planners ever, who was both a biologist and a planner. And Maria, where are you? You talked about nature. And he said, A city is more than a place in space, it's a drama in time. And I think this is beautiful because it's so true, it feels so contemporary. And more to the point, I've said for a while, jazz, this is in Madrid, this picture. Yes, good creative placemaking is more like improvised jazz than a well-tempered symphony orchestra. And I think that's true because you have to be adaptive, agile, respond to circumstances, etc., feel the place, the spirit of connection, etc., etc. Then, a city is also the laboratory for the problems of its own making, that it makes itself. And that is the beauty of all this lab talk and all this creative talk, because the city creates both the problems, but also often generates the solution. Now, we all know what a city is, and I'm just saying it very quickly. It's obviously people, it's obviously activities, it's industries, it's hardware, stuff, you know, sewage systems, roads, software, organizational orgware. That is one of the most important things. The word governance appeared a lot today. It's networks. I mean, the amount of times I saw the word connection, apart from Ciudades Creativas, but there was lots of connection here, connection there, connection everywhere. But the key thing that I think people were saying was it's collaborative, somehow, bringing things together, creating something out of the mosaic that small bits become one whole. But also a word that didn't appear yet today, but I know was implied everywhere, was trust, that you could actually speak to the other person and really bond together in some way. But the most important thing in the end, I think, is orchestration. How do you orchestrate all of these differences together into some complete whole? Now, that may be the good city, but it's also the great cultural district. Now, if we just think of things through time and this debate about culture and creativity, you could say version 1.0, it's the repertoire. Let's have a museum. Let's have a concert hall. Let's have, you know, things that open and close. When you're free, the museum closes historically. You know the problem. Then we have culture 2.0, which is more partly what you're adding on to the repertoire, and you're rethinking also how museums and things like that work. And then, over the last years, there's also been, of course, the participative imperative. We want to be involved. We want to be a shaper, maker, co-creator of that evolving place, that evolving district, which is why, so strangely, although Mr. Renner probably had slaves being whipped to do the textiles here, we like it, even though it was horrible circumstances, because we feel this unfinished is what is great. I was in a small German city and they said, doesn't matter what it's called, it was a textile city called Krefeld, and it said, we are an unfinished city, which meant that everybody felt they had potential. Then that's the sort of culture, media, tech world we're in, which is adding another layer to all of this. And what you're talking about today is absolutely the right thing, which is addressing and linking to what is urgent. And we've discussed that already in the last panel or the one before. So everybody is waking up or needs to wake up. And I think graffiti can sometimes be very helpful in telling us what is important. There was a phase where it was all called chaos. Now there's a lot of stuff about waking up. So the new wave of creativity begins at some point, you know, the way all of this stuff we were involved in, it started in lots of places, Glasgow, many places over the world. And this was the typical thing. This happens to be Poland. yeah, this building, and then all the creatives come in and say, oh, I'll make that great. And then 10 years later, the artists have saved the place, and then the professionals come in and the accountant, and everybody's pushed out. You know that dynamic, which you want to avert. So now I think, and this is so fantastic about your program, is it seeks to say, how can we see how the cultural sectors can play a big role in that transformation, in that refocusing, and looking towards the future, what might those roles be? Now, we all know things are falling apart and are fragile. This is part of the library in Melbourne, the maquette. It's a library, a knowledge centre, but it could be, again, a graffiti, which I saw 1 minute before midnight. Or this was in London, and this is an artist. It made me freak out a bit at the World Ocean Marine something something conference. So I think this is another one saying our footprint is too high. Or this person saying, actually, there are alternatives to fossil fuel. There's a whole hydrogen economy about to come. So we know there were opportunities in COVID. We had an opportunity. The air was fresher. You could hear the birds sing. You didn't hear the planes flying over. But we didn't take the opportunities. And we know the earth hurts. The earth hurts. We just know it hurts. It's telling us in the way that you had your floods last year. So the creative imagination, which you represent, I mean, so many bloody creatives in this room, it's too much, really. But anyway, that's another question. What happens when you have too many creatives in one room? Different story. So I think there's a sentence that a guy said, the difference between the clear, the complicated, the complex, the chaotic, and the confused. I think people with imagination can understand the clear, the complicated, and the complex. They're different, isn't it? It's complicated going to the moon. It's complex bringing up a child. You cannot predict what they will say to you. It's so complex, yeah? Whereas the laws of physics will tell you how to get to the moon. And then the chaotic, sometimes, when looked at closely, has a pattern. So that's okay. But when it's confusing, we're all, I was about to say fucked, but I won't say that. Now, so how do places navigate these waves of urban transformation? And I just want to make a distinction, which took me a while to work out, which is, are we talking about cultural planning or planning culturally? Cultural planning, people say, it's about time you built that innovation center, build that new museum, do that, do this. Planning culturally is different. It's more substantial. It says and means, at least in English, I mean English meaning if you're in Britain, it means understanding cultural literacy, the essence of culture, and then responding from that in terms of what you might do. Anyway, but the big question, there are many big questions, is what does this place feel like? Now, this place obviously feels pretty good, and congratulations on whoever's doing the event and orchestrating here, by the way. And by the way, translators, we can't see you in your boxes, but we obviously love you. So just acknowledgement down there. So if we feel this, now what is a cultural district? I've thought about this, you've thought about it, we've all thought about it. What sort of district do we want? One driven by this artistic concept, or a philosophy about perhaps we want this to be a very environmental place, then using the arts? That would be a philosophy. Do you just want to only do the economics and you don't care if they're just doing stuff you're not interested in? Someone had ethics and aesthetics up here earlier. I think it was Maria, wasn't it? You, the ethics and aesthetics person. Or each of these concepts can lead to a different result. Is this cultural district emergent or organic? Are you building on a source that is already happening when you're just feeding a bit here, a bit of this and that? Let it be self-organized. Is it going to be top-down? Is any of this either-or? Of course it's not either-or, but one just needs to work out the balances so that somehow it works well. But we do know, I mean, you ask these provocative questions. Is this about placemaking or place-keeping? It's both, of course. This is a ridiculous question, forcing your people to say no and yes. We are both people, aren't we? We're always both. But anyway, but sometimes on placemaking, some marketing guys, well, they're usually guys in the property industry, say, we're doing placemaking, and they build this stuff, which is very boring. But anyway, it's all of these things. Now, again, we know, again, I'm making distinctions, but there aren't any distinctions because it's all of these things we need to do together. The social agenda, the economic agenda, the environmental agenda. Now, where is it? What is this creative district? Is it a building on its own? Sometimes it is an isolated building. Okay, can be a model of something. Is it a collection or a cluster down a street? Is it, I'm only using this as thought thing just to break the thing down so that we sort of can establish what it might be. Or is it a neighborhood? And what's really good is now that cities used to only have this agenda in the city core, in that center. And then the neighborhoods could just be left as they were. My God. Maria, when you talked, you were so loud, I could hardly hear you. No, sorry. I've got to be careful about how near or far. I'm sorry, I'm just got to keep my own energy up, yeah? Anyway, but what is best? The main point, ultimately, is that we need a culture of creativity in the city as a whole. In my view, an attitude that in transport, in social affairs, and anywhere else says, yes, you can do that if. An openness that allows things to happen. And within that, yes, of course, hubs that act as inspirations, models, and things that sort of are like beacons. But there are dilemmas. How do you keep that pulse going over time? Big, big dilemma. Because as you know, what can happen, I'll give you a stupid example, keeping the creative pulse going. Finland used to have 15-year grants for artists. So they got a grant for 15 years. Then there was a restaurant I used to go to. I did a lot of things in Helsinki. And it was called Cosmos. And there were some guys there who, after the 6th year of the grant, just sat there and drank and were basically pissed. So how do you keep creativity going over time in an urban context is quite difficult. A longer discussion on the bus to Novo Hamburgo tomorrow, perhaps. A next dilemma is the gentrification one. We all know that when you make places better, someone else out there is watching and saying, oh, thanks a lot, you creative folks. Thank you so much for making this safe for me. I really appreciate it. Here's a bottle of wine. Now, you probably remember that one of the biggest gentrification processes in the world was the High Line. And Robert Hamilton, who was the trigger of the High Line in New York, possibly the most popular event or thing, he said, the one thing I did not do in advance, and I hope you do this here, you may feel you've got problems in Porto Alegre, but in 5 years' time, this is going to be buzzing so much that it's going to be crazy as people in Sao Paulo say, shit, I can't bear it here anymore, give me some rest. In 5 years' time, I predict that will be an issue. So what he said, Robert Hamilton, is what I did not do is something called value capture. He did not create a regulation with the city that those people who are looking over there getting, he calculated when I spoke to him, $9 billion extra worth of value by saying, come and buy this apartment. It overlooks the High Line. I'm giving you the view. This is my present, but the present was done by effectively a cultural activist. And he now, in order to keep the High Line going, has to beg like a beggar to get a bit of grants to keep the plants green. So value capture is key. So the other point, of course, is using creative just as a marketing tool. So I took this in Zurich West, which is the hip area of Zurich, yeah? You know, Amazon is there. Is that hip? Different matter. But all the new tech companies up this road, yeah? And then the Renaissance Hotel says, I will build a hotel called Renaissance. The one artist at the time who did not let his building be knocked down put in the same typeface, Renaissance and resistance. And that is the dilemma. I just hope you're thinking about that in advance. That is the gentrification dilemma. So, what other development? I mean, this you all know. I'm telling you what you know, by the way. You know, is this more production? Are you really going to create stuff, or is it just people watching? Is it over-tourism? You said that already. You said that in your presentation, Paula. Is it one funder? Can you do everything? Can you? No. What are the obligations if it's just one people? Should it be mixed funding? And then this question is, can one, and I think one should, of course, co-create with locals, and also balance, this is another way of saying, make sure that there's creation happening, as you well know. And then the balance of resources between public and private. Now, follow me to the House of Radical Collaboration, since we all know that this is about that. And the machine has decided to have a rest. You see, it worked! I blew it. I probably did blow it. Now, can I just tell you something? I'm only going to give you examples. Look, I'm not going to give you examples like what you've just seen, because you know enough South American, Latin American examples. So I'm going to give you odd examples. Yeah, they're just, you know, they're not the ones you might think of. Right, every creative district has one of these, yes? Which is the emblem, and I love it, yeah? It's sort of standing there and saying, we are here. I think we're going to have supper where one of them is there, yeah? There we are. Okay, that's fine. Now, this is a picture of Munich, yeah? I was brought up in Munich. I know I don't look very German. My name isn't, but I'm a fake. My grandfather was an opera singer called Schmidt. And so he thought, Schmidt is a bit boring. Let's get this French-sounding Landry into it. So in my passport, it says Charles René, another French thing, Schmidt Landry. So anyway, I was brought up in Munich, and Munich was, in the late 60s, really a hub. Jimi Hendrix destroyed his first guitar in a nightclub, and I witnessed it. It was the first, before Paris 68, student revolts, etc., etc. Now, what they call creative is it's all buzzing, you know, whatever, Google is there, research centers and everything like that. And then we have this little quarter, absolutely, be creative there. You know, like the Germans have Fasching. Be wild in Fasching, and then, you know, behave. Sorry, I'm exaggerating. But anyway, in Berlin, there's a place called Holzmarkt, which is on the river, which is where lots of skyscrapers are being built there. And they've just basically created a playground where there's nurseries and things like that. So you can see the context. This is called Holzmarkt. It's on the river there, yeah? So that's actually quite interesting, because this is owned by a cooperative, and it's financed by buildings at the edge, which raise the money to have a balanced economy. So there's profit one where and balance in the rest. So that's quite interesting. Now, I might have to blow this again. This is another classic Berlin building called Tacheles, which was creative but mad and needed to stop. But it didn't mean that when the Swedish investment company, I went to the launch, bought the site, and we all had a glass of champagne, all fine, but then built, this is talking about a rare, very, very, very creative place, yes? Built this. So we talked about the balance between heritage and innovation today. Somehow, somewhere, it could have been balanced. And I think there's a small German town. Tech friends, can you move on to the next one, please? Perhaps I'm being stupid or the batteries run out. Boom. Do we need to do the collective blowing? Shall we all blow together? Ready, steady. You see, you did it! You did it! Okay. Oh, no, it's gone back. No. Here, I'm just giving you an example of a small, but in German terms, relatively big city called Mannheim. And can you say, they've got all the words we need: integration, network, architecture, culture, innovation, education, city development, and so on. And that is one of the few places in Germany that actually structurally has brought all of these departments together to not work in silos. Here's another example. This is in Vilnius, Lithuania. Now, it might seem a small place, but they've got a lot of high-tech companies, I can assure you. This place was a crime-ridden place on the other side of a river. They decided to set up a new republic, these artists. They did that, and it's this Republic of Užupis, and they've got a constitution. And it says things, and this constitution is against a long, long wall. But I'll just tell you some elements of the constitution. I had a conversation with Paula and you earlier, and it says here, for example, a dog, this is a constitution, yeah? People love this, by the way, but what it says here, a dog has the right to be a dog. A cat is not obliged to love its owner. You sometimes do not have to fulfill your duties and obligations. Anyway, all I'm trying to say is humor is not bad in these serious matters. Here you can see this area. It's now become a bit more whatever. That's fine. This is a famous Fluxus artist who lived here. This is a sign I saw there. No meaning in life? Hey, change your values, partner or workplace. Why don't you turn off social media? So, you know, these are all sort of quite interesting things. You might think I'm not being serious, but I am being serious. Then it says a definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So here, just in the same area, the same place, is the biggest prison in Lithuania, which now is also obviously an arts hub, but also a place where they show interesting stories about crime and lots of other things that you can imagine that are quite negative. Now we're moving to Estonia. We're in the Baltics, I told you. Be bold. Per capita, Estonia has the highest rate of unicorns. A unicorn is a company worth $1 billion, yeah? The highest rate. Skype, Wise, you get the idea. A lot, Bolt, all of these are from Estonia, yeah? Which is incredible. So they have one of the biggest startup innovation events in the Nordics. Be bold, empower everybody. And they have 6 or 7 hubs. So this happens to be called the Roterman Quarter, where you see they've kept the old. I mean, whether you like this or not is irrelevant, but they're willing to do these sort of things. This area is called Nobel, the Nobel Prize winner guy. He funded this. This has been transformed. You may like this or not. This is ordinary dwelling. But what they do have is things like another problem I have, yes. But they are experimenting with architecture. They do things like one of the old buildings I thought was a really interesting experience center for kids. These are igloo houses and saunas, all in the same district. So again, you might think this is incoherent, but it's interesting. And now they're building one. The guy from Wise, who sold TransferWise for 900, I don't want to tell you how many billion, doesn't matter, a lot. And he has invested in this, it's called Crulli. And the thing about Crulli is, this is just going to happen this minute, is that's going to have exactly the qualities of Caldera, I think, and the sort of thing that we're trying to, you, not we, but I wish I was a we part of it, but you are going to do here. And here is an example, and this is unbelievably sad, is an example of an exhibition prefiguring the future of the Mariupol, that factory. And I didn't take the picture of the person who's here, but this is his phone that was recovered, and he was there with his dog. They're all 22 or something, and here are all these young people. But what's interesting, I think, in these cultural quarters, which you were saying, Paul, and you did as well, Colorado, there is this ethical thing about the big issues that really matter. I'm bringing this up not only because Greg lives near there, Nantes. I think Nantes is in some ways an example of something. There was Ile du Nantes, it's a long, big area, 10 kilometers long, and most famous because of this elephant, of course. But we won't talk about the elephant. It's fine. It's amazing. When it travels, 1 million people come to see it. But what it has done and what it needs to do perhaps next, and this was a question Greg and I were supposed to confront recently, is where next? Because the institutions are separate. There's the art school, the media campus, the design school, all the elements. But we know that these things connect, and it should be much more connected. But there is a lot in there which, this is the design school, that we can learn from. But what it also has, it was the place where most slaves from France went to the Latin America and the Caribbean. And that museum is really quite incredible, the way you see, this is where the boats went away. I'll switch. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. I think it's the battery thing. So I didn't want to talk about the things you know about, Bogota, Bronx, and all of that. But again, here's the issue: what happens to the guys who run those cars, etc., etc. But clearly, I've probably got too many slides because this doesn't like it either. Perhaps I should stop here. Shall I stop? There we go. Anyway, I don't need to say more. So what is best? What next and how? There has to be a plan B. And that plan B, I think, has many qualities. Obviously, you need to be able to measure all of this, and you can measure, and I think you are. You need to measure whether you're having enough, talent involved. Can you encourage it? It's happening over there. Is the incentives and regulations regime helping what you want? Is it harnessing and bringing the networks together? But can you, most importantly, see that it is a place that is creative? So the next big question is, the district models. Is this going to be a model itself of sustainability, or are you going to be producing services and products here that go through the whole city of Porto Alegre and beyond? Well, perhaps that's a stupid either-or question like your provocation, and it's in fact both. So somehow the challenge for this quarter is to develop those products that essentially save the world. I'm pressing as hard as I can, and we might have to blow again. Yes. So it is both. And this is an interesting exhibition from Amsterdam, which is called We Make the City. And you can see all the words that are actually relevant to what you might want to do here. Here, you know, smart, climate-proof, and so on. Now, just a few words in summarizing what I thought and think. I was asked to do an exhibition in Sicily, and it was called The Art of City Making, Creative City Making. And all through the city, it was reflecting this notion of yearning. And I think there is a yearning everywhere for a different story, a different way of looking at things. And whether that happens, we will see. But this story is really a story of this togetherness and this connection that I think we've all talked about. And certainly when I'm interviewing people, that's the issue that comes up a lot. Guys, can you switch to the next slide? So over the city, there are all these signs. Next. Is there an ideal city? Are you a city maker? Is your city inspiring? Is your city listening? Next slide. And so on. So you can see that throughout the city, you can use the city itself as a communications device to tell your story. Next slide. Can you hear me? Next slide. Next slide. So this is just the exhibition in action, but it was spread out into the streets. So now I'm going to do two more things. I'm going to suggest that we should think in metaphors and think like a gardener, because the gardening thinking is exactly, has the attributes, I think, that we need for city making and city makers. So when we think like a gardener, your computer is, next slide, you have that thing about growth and greenhouse, and there's got many dimensions, growth. It's not just about size. It's a powerful word. Next slide. It begins that metaphor again. Is it a machine or an organism? Next slide. It's regenerative and holistic. It implies when you're gardening, you're looking at everything in operation. You're connecting everything. It conditions how you think, plan, and act. Next slide. So let's look what's going on. When you look closely, a gardener observes everything, the conditions, the resources, the soil, and so on. Next slide. So this is a garden. It happens to be my own, but this is this area, Porto Alegre, this area here. But when you look closely here, you have to work out, how will things work? You have to think short, medium, long term. You have to work out the balance of sun and light in the summer, winter, spring and autumn. You need to really look at sizes. So it's an incredibly complicated, hard bit of work. Next slide. And that is creative work, but it comes, I think the garden is a good metaphor. Next slide. Because it has a 360-degree perspective. It's short, medium, long-term thinking. It's thinking about color. It's thinking about you balancing curation, and again, the word orchestration. Next slide. And you renew, it's recyclable, it's composting, it's getting your hands dirty. Next slide. It requires continuing care. It's knowing the dynamics of what's going on. Next slide. And there's a lot of waiting, just like in planning. Approvals, you wait. will the plant grow? You have to wait. Will the planning permission happen? It's frustrating. It takes a long time. I mean, this was empty for 20 years. And nature has its own unplanned ways. A bird suddenly flies in, drops an acorn, and you get an oak tree. You didn't know it, yeah? Next slide. So a gardener is the caretaker. The decision maker is the caretaker and steward. Next slide. So another example just is the mycelium or the butterfly, you know. Next slide. Why a mycelium? A mycelium, you know, is the biggest plant in the world. It's a fungus. It has stuff on top and the bottom. It's like infrastructure, soft and hard. It's got a generous network. It feeds, it nurtures other plants that are weak. It is software and hardware. So thinking in that way, I think helps us, next slide, to move forward. There are endless parallels between what you're doing and a garden, seeding, incubating, being a nursery, being a hothouse, and creating variety. Next slide. So, the guiding principles, next slide, or whatever, is a continual interplay between the big culture and the narrow culture. And obviously a major manifestation is the arts. Next slide. So in that sense, city making is a cultural project because it's about values, mindsets, aesthetics, behavior, and it obviously responds to the circumstances of a place. Next slide. So what all of this is about is a shift in paradigm. It's an empowering ethos. It's making everybody feel they can make the extraordinary happen. And what it means, next slide, there's a bigger story there, which is back to this culture of creativity, and that creativity can be social, environmental, whatever, business, but also bureaucratic. So then the other guiding principle is that it's a glass half full approach. We know the situation is dreadful, but we try to make weakness into strength. Next slide. And one little switch and flip is to say, be best not in this place here, in the world, but for the world. That one change in word completely changes the perspective on what might happen. Next slide. So what makes a livable city? Well, usually it comes to a block. What that is, was a block, a brick wall. And what is the transformative effect? Can you flip on for me? Next slide. Next slide. Because it's easier to imagine the fall of the world than to remake it. Next slide. Because as this German exhibition said, there's angst, which is anxiety. Next slide. To dream about a utopia or some better place. Next slide. And that is one of the major dilemmas. So there's a crisis of imagination and daring. And I think creatives have lots more daring than many other people. Next slide. Unfortunately, the bigger the dream, the less visible pattern. So let's go into this livable city, and I'll just finish there. Please, next slide. So, great places, great, creative, resilient, culturally vibrant places are places of anchorage and distinctiveness. So that is distinctively Indian in Jodhpur, or that is distinctively Fez in Morocco, or that, next slide, is distinctively Istanbul. So a lot of what's been said is be as you are. The next thing, places of great resilience, etc., blend the old and the new. They don't continually forget. Like here is an old warehouse, and this is a collective meal. Next slide. They're places of nourishment and nurture. So I presume there is a food strategy here, which is about local food and local product and local cooking and local, all of that. But also nurture and nourishment is all of these things. Great places are, what are they? Of affordability and access. And one of the best things about that is I know we think Singapore is sometimes a bit rigid. One thing they're very good at is having affordable housing through every age range. So anyone wants to look at housing policy should look at Singapore. Next slide. Vibrant places are places of communication and connection. I nearly dare not say the words anymore, but that can be all sorts of things. This is, in Paris, of course, the physical can do that, but it can be an artwork like Cloud Gate in Chicago. Next slide. Places of critical thinking and reflection. There need to be, like today, places where one can discuss issues that one doesn't normally have the time and space to discuss. Next slide. Places, obviously, of diversity. Come as you are, just be who you are. Next slide. Places of opportunity and ambition. Of course, this is one of these places. Next slide. Places of addressing the big issues that really matter. And you all know this. Next slide. This is Olafur Eliasson's ice that he moved around from Greenland, so you really viscerally felt that the ice was melting. Places of inspiration, obviously, and aspiration. This is, at this bus station in Helsinki, a chapel of silence. If you ever go to Helsinki, go in there. Just go in there. I mean, it's so Finnish. Or this in Cape Town, the people were moved out of the central area, the blacks, and then in the Baptist church, they drew the street pattern, and people who lived there once just wrote their name on the floor. You know, you get the idea. Places of serious fun. I think placemaking needs that as well. This is Banksy, of course. I'll tell you something, and we're nearly there, I'm sorry. Normally, if I'd been doing this, I would be saying da-da-da-da-da, dum-dum-dum, dee-dee-dee-dee. But now we have to go, next slide, next slide, next slide. Go back. Can I just... It's quite funny, actually. Anyway, this is in Bristol. Bristol has 250,000 inhabitants. The museum, the social museum, wasn't visited very much. This had 400,000 visitors because Banksy subverted 100 images and places in the museum. So if we're trying to be vibrant, we really need to think laterally. This is him subverting a sculpture and talking about consumption. Next slide. So obviously digitally savvy, data sovereignty, blending we have to now think of artificial intelligence, obviously. And then, as we come to a close, places of bending the market to bigger picture purposes. The market on its own will never solve the problems. We want its energies, but it's not all about money. It's about other things too. And finally, places of good governance and imagination. Next slide. Next slide. So this is a festival that some of you know about and have been to even. 2,100 people came there last week. Bureaucrats, they came. Many from Latin America. We have given many prizes to many Latin Americans at this festival because there's a creativity bureaucratically when you look at the continent as a whole, which is astonishing. So it's about rethinking rules, and I think that's a movement in the making. And what else? Next slide. a conclusion. Less what is the value of culture and creativity, more what is the cost of not valuing them. And I can tell you a quote by Brian Eno, which is, "Artists are to the city what worms are to the soil." So it's back to this, sorry, I duplicated that. Stop, next slide. I'm going to go to bed and just think now, next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide. And that is the end. And thank you very much. Next slide.